big insurance will literally rip the head off of big pharma and shit down their throat. They have all the fucking power, dude. 100%. All the power is in big insurance. They control what drugs get approved. They control what drugs get covered. They control like which tier placement they get. And now the big insurance companies control all your lab testing. Any of the, like if you want to get a blood work done, like an example is too, I owned a blood lab. You know, I've had a bunch of different experiences in this space. And when we would go out and educate clinicians and say, hey, here's the reason why you'd want to pull blood work, all the things that is now ways to well. I explain, you got to stop practicing sick care. We cannot wait for patients to get sick. What we need to do is get proactive and not reactive. How do we do that? We begin to do that by analyzing the patient at a biological level and identifying potential risk factors based off their markers. And maybe they don't have diabetes today, but if they're on the verge of diabetes, treat. Let's start now. Let's get ahead of it before they progress and the disease state or the hole gets too big that they have to dig out of. And doctors would say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. We'd start educating them on all the panels to pull. And for about 12 months, we got reimbursed. And then the insurances started sending letters to doctors saying, we don't think you should have pulled this blood work. If you continue to pull these extensive panels, we will put your contract under review.
Wow.
So if I'm a clinician and I lose Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm out of business.
We will put your contract under review for taking proactive measures to keep people healthy.
For running up the cost of healthcare is what they will say. Like big insurance's narrative is this guy's running up the cost of healthcare, pulling unnecessary blood panels on a patient. You know, this guy's 33. Why did you pull a full panel? Well, again, that's why we ended up pivoting and doing ways to well and going cash pay and cutting out all these people, which we'll get into. But I mean, layer upon layer upon another example, pharmacogenetic test. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Most people fucking haven't. You know why? Insurance doesn't fucking cover it. So it's an amazing test. And we launched it. It's a cheek swab. You drop it in an envelope. Within 48 hours, we know your unique genetic makeup, what your cytochrome P450 variance is, and how you're going to metabolize a majority of the medications on the market, including high-risk medications like Plavix, that if somebody's a slow metabolizer, it could kill them. It had a black box warning. Like, we could go down the list of all the benefits of this pharmacogenetic test. And clinicians loved it. And they're like, oh my God, it tells me it'll tell somebody if an opioid won't work. Because certain outliers of the population have a unique genetic marker that makes their body incapable of properly processing an opioid and getting pain relief. And so we would say, test these patients before you write them these catastrophic medications. Like, So
this is a known variable, and it's not taken into consideration when they prescribe oxys?
Correct, yeah. And it's the test got covered by insurance for probably 12 to 18 months, and then insurance sent letters saying, we're no longer covering this. We're not going to cover these tests.
What happens to a person if they have that variant and then they do get prescribed opiates?
Well, they don't get relief. And so then the question becomes, is this patient drug seeking or is this patient just in pain, right? And that's part of what we were trying to clear up.
And do they just ramp up the dose?
Typically, they'll end up upping the dose, or they'll try and pivot and find something else.
What is a pivot? Like, how do you pivot when someone is not responding to
the most potent? Well, that's what's hard. And in the pain field, they've got an array of tools in their tool belt. I was never a pain specialist. I wasn't really in that space. But the other part of that, what would happen is they came out and after the opioid disaster, they had all these guidelines on, we want you to, if you're going to prescribe an opioid in order to protect from divergence or misuse, we recommend that you do a toxicology screening. Okay, well, even that, the insurance quit covering. They used to cover that, and they stopped covering in the majority of cases toxicology screening. So all of the tools that are safety nets are being strategically eliminated. And it's not some bad intention of let's create this terrible environment for people. It literally just comes down to whether we're talking about big insurance, big pharma, or big medical, or big hospitals, they are trying to hit quarterly earnings.
And so
every
when
time.
you have something like COVID vaccines that come along and create this enormous source of profit, and then they're not necessary anymore because it becomes endemic, and then the variants decrease in the potency to a point where it's like a common cold, which is how many people experience Omicron. Then they have to find reasons why you need to continually medicate.
Yeah.
Because they need to keep funneling those profits in.
You got it.
Because they're in a place of constant growth, right? If you're involved in a corporation, they don't want bad years. They don't want bad quarters. If they've made enormous windfalls, they want to continue that.
Yeah. You got it. No, if there is a way to continue to reskin a drug and not have to go through the R&D phase, then they're going to do it 10 out of 10 times. And it's even crazier in med device, man. I wait till we talk.
Med device.
Med device is anything in the operating room, an implantable, a pacemaker, a knee, a shoulder, mesh, stitches, sutures, anchors, screws, plates, all of it. I brought this. I brought a plate to show you. I want to show you this, and you tell me what you think this amazing marvel would cost.
Well, it's a piece of, is this titanium?
It's like just a little piece of titanium metal.
What does that cost?
That is about $800, and then each one of those holes is a screw. And the screws start at $125.
Is this the set
screw.
bone?
It's to
if you have a break?
If you break in your wrist, it's to set that. And
Okay.
so
I know a lot of
when we
people
start
have
talking
these.
about the price of healthcare, it's like that piece of technology has been around for what, 30, 40 years, that plate, and we're still charging $700 for a plate that costs what, 50 cents to make? I mean, I can't fathom that costs more than a couple bucks. I can't
Well,
fathom.
titanium's kind of expensive,
But
isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it. But $700 for that, and a screw's $125. It looks like something you could pick up at Home Depot. But where it gets crazy with big medical, and I didn't know this when I was in medical, they have a process. So the same way they try to extend patents in pharma so they don't have to do safety studies, in the 1975, the FDA established what they called the 510K approval process. And nobody knows this. Essentially what it was devices, technology were now coming up quickly. And they needed a way to get this technology into the OR safely and efficiently and quickly. And the FDA didn't have the resources. Most of their funding comes from private industry. That's one of the other challenges. 62 or 63% of the FDA's funding is from private industry.